Baba, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today.
Yes, very good afternoon to you, Esther.
Before we talk about how the market performed today, I want to just quickly just hear your thoughts on this story around, of course, the acquisition of Dangote Flour. Now, Crown Flour Mills has submitted a revised offer with a final recommendation of 120 billion amount. That's amounting to 24 naira per share, of course, following the final adjustment. Just, share your thoughts with this latest development around this story between of course, Dangote Flour, Olam, and how it's playing out at the market.
Oh, yes. Very good afternoon to you once again. Okay, if you have to recall, sometime in 2015, Dangote Flour did sell its controlling interest to Tiger Brands for a whopping sum of money. Of course, a year after, we saw a sell back to Dangote of the entire holdings. Only this April, we're seeing consummated transactions between Crown Flour, which is a subsidiary of Olam International, showing interest in buying substantial holding in Dangote Flour. I think that the price that was quoted then was, I think, in the neighborhood about 26 or thereabout. But we're seeing a revised bid of about 24, which from all intent and purpose may say true. Of course, that spiked the share price from about below 19 as at yesterday, 2 days back, to 20.5 as we speak. Well, I think that's innovative, and we should see more of such acquisition in the agri sector.
Well, what about how are investors reacting to this in terms of the volume on the stock and what they think about in terms of if they're getting value for money?
Well, I think the whole process is not rounded up yet.
Okay.
We're still going to have a court sanction meeting. Yes, of course, we're going to have shareholders, sanctioning these transactions. Yeah, so that is expected to come up, say, in the next couple of months, and of course, that will give a clear signal of the final closure of these transactions. I think investors too, given the general tempo of the market, are a bit wary. As to, if the transaction, as it were, will come to final friction. And that's why you're not seeing the share, closing, closer to 24. I think it's still a bit about less than 21. Ordinarily, we should have seen the share price, closing up to almost 22, 23, down the line, yes.
Let's talk about today's trading, broad trading on the NSE. We saw losses across the banking, consumer goods, industrials. We know that this market continues to look for that, some major catalysts to help drive it into positive territory. But just help us, understand how the market traded today in terms of volumes levels that we saw, and perhaps some stocks that perhaps saw significant bid levels on them.
Well, I think we did see a broad-based sell-off on all the key headline sectors, today's trading. Except for, I think, oil and gas, that's actually, recorded a marginal gain. That is not unexpected. The market is actually waiting very fervently on the key interim paying stocks, even though we saw the fact that MTN did, release its half year, and they are paying about, I think, about 295. The market did not really, pricing, that interim dividend so much. We're actually still expecting the 4 key tier 1 banks. Let's see what happens. This time last year, Zenith Bank actually have released their F1, and of course the share price had gone up. So we're probably thinking that that's some sort of catalyst that the market is actually waiting for to move marginally up. Because if you take the effect of Airtel and MTN that were listed a couple of months back, you find out that the market is way below 10 trillion capitalization. Yeah, we've not had it so bad, quote unquote, in recent years. So we're just open for a major catalyst, and I think maybe the interim paying bank stocks will give us that catalyst. Yeah.
But did you foresee the index coming down to hovering around 27,000 points?
Well, I think that if you look at some of those equity pricing, they've actually maintained a threshold. Zenith Bank, for ones that have not actually fallen off too deeply. Yeah, it's been oscillating around 18, 17.8. That tells you that it's actually kind of almost bottomed out. Yeah, we're actually waiting for what the result will look like, the PAT as well as the payouts. Once that is released, I think the market will take it up from there. Of course, we've not seen a deep drop in GTB. The same goes with Access Bank does look like it was going to pick up before the close of business today. So, but I think that we are not likely going to see a very deep drop in most of these equity prices. Rather, we'll probably see signposts in terms of where they should go. Yeah.
For those investors who are still bargain hunting, where are they seeing value right now?
Well, across the sectors, if you ask me, most of the equity prices have actually dropped so low. Yeah, I think you need to begin to look at, for instance, PZ. Even though we know that PZ performance has not been so remarkable lately, but at 6 naira, it's way off what it should be. I think the market has unduly punished that equity. The same goes for USC. USC did a right issue of about 14 sometime last year or two, and it's traded out below 6 naira. That's quite remarkably low. Across the sector, I think there are massive cherry picking that one can actually embark on. But of course, you need to have the purchasing power to do that. A lot of retail investors actually, the variant of cash, so to speak. The key drivers would likely be the big portfolio managers and the high network investors. These are the people that actually will drive the market, in the near terms. That's my take.
So I want to quickly take you back to the half-year earnings that we saw recently, especially for the consumer goods companies. What would you say those numbers, and how do you think also investors processed what those numbers say about the operating environment, about how these companies are maneuvering the business environment? Also, I mean, things like metrics like consumers, the strength, especially of consumer spending.
Well, there's a common dominator in all of this result of most of these consumer sector goods. The turnover has actually dropped very remarkably. Of course, the reasons are not far-fetched. We all know that the economic climate is a bit not so friendly. Insecurity across the nations, here and there, and of course, we need to have an inflicted, and hyper consumer spending that will push up these sectors. If you look at what the PZ, except for Nestle that did an enhanced gross earning, all of that consumer sector goods did post a remarkable drop in their turnover. Of course, turnover is a function of the fact that people are not buying these products. Yeah, and consequentially, you're going to see build up of inventory, which is actually going to affect their bottom line. So we expect that before the end of the third quarter, we probably will see a different direction that will step up the momentum of most of these consumer sector goods, and that will translate to, more demand on this product.
But what would you say is the biggest worry of the typical investor right now? Is it, the business environment, or is it just they're worrying about the economy and going forward, the outlook for the economy? How do you gauge the level of confidence that investors have in the state of the economy right now?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. One, if you look at what's happening in Asia, the Asia market actually almost, I will not use the word crashed, yeah, has its own kettle of issues, yeah. And of course, in the U.S., we saw the market, took a very massive, drop, for 2 days. It lost almost $766 billion, yeah. And the good part of African market is currently not doing well. I think it's a global trend. It's not peculiar to Nigeria, but we need to improvise and see how we can, get off these vicious circles and and step up the momentum. Yeah. Okay. Beyond that, I think there's little or nothing we can do about that. If Brexit is still an issue on the table that we don't have a closure on, of course, that means that remittances from offshore will drop. And once this drops, of course, investments will be impaired, negatively as it were. So I think that, it's a global trend and a global phenomenon, even though there is a content that has to do with the local, scenario,
Absolutely.
Which mostly, plays on to security and, lack of consumer purchasing power, which are key major issues, yes.
Bye-bye, Ibrahim. Thank you for talking to us today. We appreciate your time. Bye-bye, Ibrahim,
yeah,
Managing Director of Mainstreet Securities, talking us through the performance of the stock market here in Lagos.